Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into some absolutely key facts about koalas. We're going to break down the fascinating biology, the kind of crazy lifestyle, and the really urgent conservation status of Australia's most iconic tree dweller. I mean, if you've ever wondered how on earth these creatures survive on a diet that is literally toxic to almost everything else, or why they sleep for, well, most of the day, you are in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's take a really quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Meet the marsupial. 2. Physical traits and biology. 3. The toxic eucalyptus diet. 4. Life cycle and reproduction. 5. Threats and conservation. And finally, we'll wrap things up with a rapid-fire FAQ section. We've got a lot of amazing ground to cover, so let's just jump right in.
Section 1. Meet the marsupial. We're kicking things off by completely busting the absolute biggest myth about our furry little friends.
You've probably heard the term koala bear a million times, right? Thanks to their dense, woolly fur and that undeniable teddy bear look, early European settlers literally thought they were bears. But actually, scratch that. They are strictly marsupials. That means they give birth to highly underdeveloped young and carry them around in a pouch. Believe it or not, their closest living evolutionary relative isn't a bear at all. It's actually the wombat. No way, right?
Moving on to Section 2, Physical Traits and Biology. Let's look at the specialized anatomy that makes them the ultimate tree-dwelling machines.
So check out their paws. They don't just have one thumb, they actually have 2 opposable digits on their front paws. It essentially gives them this incredible vice-like grip on tree branches. But here's the totally mind-blowing fact for you. Koalas have individual fingerprints, and they are so incredibly similar to human fingerprints that they can literally fool forensic experts under an electron microscope. How wild is that?
Now, see that 0.2%? That perfectly illustrates a koala's brain-to-body weight ratio. Their brain makes up just 0.2% of their entire body weight. It's surprisingly tiny, taking up only about 60% of their cranial cavity, and the surface of the brain is actually really smooth. You might be wondering, why would evolution do that? Well, it all boils down to saving extremely precious physiological energy. Brains burn a ton of calories, and as we're about to see, koalas absolutely do not have calories to spare.
Which brings us right to Section 3, the toxic eucalyptus diet. This is where their entire existence revolves around one seriously difficult food source.
Koalas are what you'd call extreme dietary specialists. They pack away up to a full kilogram, so about 2.2 pounds, of eucalyptus leaves every single day. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Eucalyptus leaves are incredibly tough, super low in nutrition, and highly toxic to almost every other animal. To handle this, koalas evolved a specialized digestive organ called a cecum. It's up to 2 meters long. It's completely packed with specific bacteria that break down and detoxify the poison. They essentially walk around with a built-in poison control center right in their gut.
Because of that intense diet, they have to sleep for up to 22 hours a day just to conserve the energy they need to digest it all. Processing those toxins is incredibly taxing on their bodies. And since their meals give them practically zero fuel, all that sleep isn't them just being lazy. It's an absolutely vital, non-negotiable biological survival mechanism.
All right, Section 4, Life Cycle and Reproduction. Let's shift gears and see how these super sleepy survivors actually bring new life into the world. Looking at their incredible growth journey, it all starts with one of the absolute shortest mammalian pregnancies on Earth, just 35 days. After that, the baby moves into the mom's pouch for about 6 months. And get this, a koala's pouch actually opens toward the rear, not facing forward like a kangaroo's. Once they outgrow the pouch, they spend the next 6 to 12 months just riding around on their mother's back, before finally hitting full independence between 12 and 18 months of age. That back riding stage is adorable, for sure. But think back to the very beginning. At just 35 days in, that little baby is born completely blind, without ears, and is roughly the size of a jelly bean. We're talking less than a single gram. Now, as they transition out of the pouch, they desperately need those detoxifying gut bacteria we talked about earlier. To get them, the baby actually eats a specialized form of the mother's droppings called pap. Yeah, it sounds pretty unappetizing to us, but it is an absolutely critical transfer of life-saving microbes that lets the growing koala finally eat toxic eucalyptus. Sadly, we have to transition now to Section 5, Threats and Conservation. It's time for a pretty harsh reality check regarding their vulnerable status in the wild today.
The data here is incredibly urgent. A staggering 92% of the threat severity facing koalas right now comes from extreme habitat loss, mostly from land clearing and urbanization. Following closely behind that, 78% is attributed to disease, specifically chlamydia, which just ravages koala populations, causing devastating issues like blindness and infertility. Add in a 70% severity from climate change and massive bushfires, and it makes total sense why the Australian government officially bumped the koala up to endangered status in several eastern regions back in 2022.
To wrap up our deep dive today, let's move into Section 6, Frequently Asked Questions. Let's solidify everything we've learned with 4 rapid-fire questions.
Let's kick off with question number 1. Do koalas actually drink water? It's a really interesting behavioral question that ties right into the origins of their name.
So the word koala is widely thought to mean no drink or no water in several Aboriginal languages, like the Darug language. And it's true. Under normal circumstances, they rarely ever drink water from the ground. They basically rely almost entirely on the moisture locked inside those leafy meals, getting roughly 90% of their necessary hydration straight from eating eucalyptus.
Moving to question 2, are koalas actually bears? We touched on this at the very beginning, but honestly, it is the #1 global myth that constantly needs busting.
The answer is a definitive no. Despite everyone calling them koala bears, they are proud members of the marsupial family. They give birth to those tiny, underdeveloped young and safely carry them in a pouch, which makes their closest genetic cousin the wombat, not a grizzly or a black bear.
Okay, question 3. Why do koalas sleep so much? You might secretly envy their resting schedule, but as we've learned, it's definitely not a lifestyle choice.
It is purely a biological necessity. They need up to 22 hours of sleep a day just to survive. It takes a massive, physically exhausting amount of work for that 2-meter-long caecum and its bacteria to process and detoxify eucalyptus. Because those leaves offer almost zero nutritional energy, their bodies literally have no fuel left over for anything other than resting.
And our final FAQ, question 4. What is a baby koala call? Let's end this rapid-fire session on a cute yet highly scientific note.
A baby koala is called a joey. It's the exact same term we use for baby kangaroos. And just remember, that little joey starts its life incredibly vulnerable, completely blind, absolutely no ears, and weighing less than a single gram before making its big trek into the mother's rear-facing pouch.
So, we've explored their incredible biology, those amazing double thumbs, and that highly specialized diet, but we've also confronted the massive threats they are currently up against. With habitat loss at 92%, will future generations only know the koala through explainers like this, or can conservation efforts turn the tide before it is too late? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this final thought leaves you inspired to reflect on our role in protecting Australia's most iconic and vulnerable marsupial.